Learn how to do it. Learn how to do it and then find somebody to help you that cares about doing it properly. And you're just not another number. I have so many clients that come to me that I inherit from other CPAs and other things. And not everybody's created equal. I correct a lot of mistakes. And I see a lot of mistakes and I go, oh, God, what a shame. I wish I could have talked to you a couple of years earlier. I could have saved you a bunch of money, but that happens. It happens. That's life. So
Step into the world of success with Your Brand Amplified, the ultimate podcast designed to unravel the intricacies of thriving businesses. I'm your host, Annika Jackson, and I'm on a mission to uncover the stories, strategies, and secrets that have propelled entrepreneurs and business leaders to success. I am very excited about the next topic I have with Roger Pearson of Siegel Technologies. I definitely made this mistake in starting businesses and not having the right people and the right system set up for my own company and personal financial well-being. And Roger, this is something that you are truly an expert in. So I'm really appreciative that you're on the show today.
Oh, thank you for having me so much.
Yeah. Now, you have 40 years or so of experience in the business world. You've worked across multiple different businesses, and I would love to hear some of those businesses and that story, and then how you decided that you really wanted to help people and small business owners. Particularly, you have that servant leadership heart where you want to serve and you want to make sure people are set up for success.
Well, I suppose I started my first business, oh God, probably back in around 1970. Okay. So I'm aging myself. And I've done all kinds of things. I've tried the multi-level marketing route. I owned a lawn care business for a while and decided I didn't like to do that. So I owned a custodial business for a while. Decided I didn't like to do that. And I've spent 10 years in the restaurant business, managing restaurants. I worked my way up from dishwashers to management positions. And I've also spent 4 years in supermarket management. I was in the computer world for the 90s. And so a variety of different things that I've tried. I found a lot of things I don't like to do is what I did the first 30 years there. But, the 90s, I don't know if your viewership is old enough to remember this or not, but the 90s were the decade of downsizing. And everybody was reducing their workforce. So, during the 90s, 3 different times, I worked for 3 corporations. I got up to a nice management position, and then they would call me and says, well, this entire level of management is being eliminated. Your job doesn't exist anymore. Thank you very much. And that happened to me 3 times in 10 years. And I'm going, I don't know if I want to go back in the corporate world or not. So my sister-in-law says, well, while you're deciding what you want to do, why don't you go take a tax course? I'll even pay for it. I've been doing this, on the side for a while, making some extra money, and, it'll help you out. And so I did about in 92, that was, or not that, yeah, 92. And I got my decades wrong, 2002. And so, I found I love doing it. And because of my business background, I specialized in helping small business people. And I had to learn so much more about business myself and the foundational aspects of business myself. I'd done it, but, I, like everybody else, I just went to work and did things and didn't pay much attention to it. And here I had to pay attention to it. And the more I paid attention, the more I learned, the more I saw the need for this. And especially people that they have a dream, they want to go out and work for themselves, and they come in and they sit down in front of me and I tell them what their tax bill is, and they about have a heart attack because they didn't realize that 25 to 40% of their net profit goes to taxes, depending on where they live, unless they know how to shelter it and use the tax laws in their favor. And so for the last 22 years, that's what I've been doing, is helping people use the tax laws in their favor. And a lot of people say, well, I tell people the most boring thing I'd ever think in my life is being an accountant. And they say, well, that doesn't make any sense. I mean, you deal with numbers all the time. And I says, no, taxes are more than numbers. A good tax person that you should have on your team is going to know how to use the tax laws against the IRS in your favor. That's what makes you good. And that's what I've tried to achieve in the last couple of decades and I've helped a lot of people save a lot of money doing that. And now I'm at the point I'm going, I'm in my 70s. And you come to a point in your life and you realize what's important and what's not important. And I decided the important thing at the end of my days, when I say my goodbyes, I want to be able to look back and say, how many people's lives did I improve along the way? Because in the end, it's not what you earn. It's not what you owe. It's not all the vacations you may be able to take and see the world. It's how many people's lives you've improved along the way is going to be the measure of how people remember you, you know? And there's no greater satisfaction in anything that you can do of helping other people like that. There really is no other. That's the greatest. And that's the other thing I had to learn over the last couple of decades. And the more I did it, the more I learned that. And it was probably the most important lesson I've ever learned in my life. So a couple of years ago, I said, I want to get on things like podcasts and write courses. And I've got college level courses and everything else I have to teach people this stuff because the education system doesn't do it.
Yeah.
Our education system is horrible when it comes to small business, which doesn't make any sense. Small business is the backbone of our economy. You would think that would be one of the most important things they would teach in our educational system, and yet it's the last. I taught beginner tax courses for a while. I would have college business majors come to my classes, and they would come up to me and they would say, our professors wouldn't teach us anything. We went up and asked questions like we're asking you, and they would tell us they'd have to go find the answer someplace else because they didn't teach that in this class.
Right.
And that's a shame. The colleges get business majors ready for the corporate world, but not the small business world. And that's a whole nother thing. And it's something that should be addressed. And I'm trying to do my part to address it. So in a long way, that's kind of a synopsis of where I've been and where I'm going.
Well, I appreciate that so much as somebody who is about to turn 50, has done a lot of different things, finally has figured out what I'm really passionate about. I love the fact that it doesn't matter when you start, as long as you find your passion and the will and the way that you're going to help people, you can start it at any time in your career.
Absolutely.
And I do teach grad school, and we do teach people how to utilize it in the real world, whether they're entrepreneurs or working for a business. But at the same time, I'm also getting my MBA so that I can teach full time. And I'm experiencing the exact same thing you're talking about, is so much of the material is about corporate. It's about corporations. And that's not where my heart lives. And that's not where I'm going to be living. And so this is great information, but it's not going to be useful in my day-to-day life, where things such as what you have created with your online courses and the questions we can ask ourselves and understand how to really make sure that we're setting up our structures correctly, that this is the right time, that we know and understand how to save money or how to put it back into our businesses. And I don't want to say game the system, but use what the tax code is to our advantage, because that's
absolutely
what we're there for.
Absolutely. The other thing I run into, which is always interesting, is that I'll get into some meetings and things and get to talking to people, and they say, well, I don't have to learn all of that stuff because I'll just hire somebody to do it for me. And so I ask them, well, how do you know it's the proper person to hire unless you know the material yourself? I mean, if you owned a plumbing business and you were to hire a plumber, would you just assume that they know what they're doing, or would you sit down and interview them? And how would you know if they're a good plumber if you didn't know plumbing yourself? Mm-hmm. And it's the same way when you're hiring an accountant or you're hiring a tax professional. You need to know the material somewhat yourself so that you can put the right person on the team, because if you put the wrong person there, they could lose you thousands and thousands of dollars.
Yeah. Yeah, I've had that experience. You hire the person you think knows the things that you don't know, and you trust them to do it. But if you don't know enough yourself and you're not keeping on top of it. Exactly. Yeah.
That's exactly right. And people don't realize it. And the other thing is, and then I have other people that I talk to, well, I don't want to run my own business. I want to go up the management track. And so I ask them, oh, well, how do you make yourself valuable to your employer? And I think one of the reasons I was able to go up the management track faster than most people because I understood the basics of business. I understood how a business ran. And you make yourself and your employer realizes you know how this business runs, you're going to be the better person to give the promotion to. So it's important for people on those management tracks to also learn this information. It's going to make their life a whole lot easier and make themselves more valuable to an employer. Even if you're going out and you're interviewing for this position you want, if you can demonstrate through your conversation that you understand business basics, you understand how business works, not at the corporate level, but at the very bottom, the very basics, the legal, the organizational, the tax consequences, all of that, they're going to see you as much more valuable to hire than the other person they're talking to.
Yeah.
So this information, no matter where you are in the business world, is really, really important to know.
Yeah, absolutely. I sometimes joke that when I was in high school, I was part of junior achievement. And so we would start, this is in Topeka, Kansas, and they'd put us with other high school students from the area with a couple of people from a local business, and we would start a company, and we had to sell stock to ourselves and to our family members. And we had to go through the whole process of starting a business and then dissolving it at the end, including all of the accounting work. And I was very involved with that. And even though I'm not naturally wanting to be an accountant, right, or get into the numbers, that
Right.
helped me in future jobs when I was working for a magazine company and the person who was responsible for half of the accounting process left. I knew enough for a very simple business to help them out until they could hire the right person. And so I was able to show my value. So everything you're saying, I 100% I've seen this in action for myself. So I appreciate you sharing your journey a little bit and some of the examples that have helped you. I do want to ask, when people are starting a business, they're so busy with the things they're passionate about and then going, oh gosh, I actually have to set up a business structure. I have to learn all this other stuff that I didn't think about. What do you see as some of the biggest mistakes people start besides hiring the wrong person and not having this education when they are creating their business?
Most of them just don't see the importance of it.
Hmm.
They just don't, it's not sexy.
Yeah.
Marketing, social media, all this stuff, that's the sexy stuff. That's what they're concentrating on. And that should be the secondary thing. That's important. It's absolutely important. Without the marketing, you're not going to go anywhere. But the person that sets their business up on a solid foundation, when they get into competition in the marketplace, and there's a lot of competition in the marketplace, unless you live in a small town in the middle of nowhere, there's a lot of competition. And the person that has their business on a solid footing is the one that's going to survive when hard time comes. And we really saw that when the country shut down a few years ago during the COVID thing. The businesses that survived were the businesses that were prepared for it, not just the fly-by-night ones that just want to wish it away,
Yeah, that is such a good point. I think that even for myself, sometimes it's easier to get going in your business. During the pandemic, I accidentally started a business because I was getting so many small clients in. We're all working from home, so I didn't have a lot of overhead, and saw that play out, right? I kind of had the cart before the horse. I'd started the business without setting the strong foundation. Now, of course, I realize you have to have a strong foundation. You have to have your system set up. You have to understand the finances. What kind of business are you setting up? Do you have a sole proprietorship, a DBA, LLC, a corporation? When is the right time to start or to change what kind of business you have? I didn't understand any of that. And it took a lot of trial and error to get me to the point where I'm like, I would not recommend that anybody goes into business unless they have time to set up that foundation, because then they're set up for long-term success.
Exactly. That's exactly. I tell anybody that if your business is set up properly, you're going to know what your net profit is at any time of the day of the year, period.
Yeah.
If you don't know that, then you don't have your business set up properly, The other thing a lot of people say, they just listen to Uncle Joe or whatever, and they say, oh, well, I need an S corporation. I said, really? Do you? Maybe not. Most people don't, unless you're in some states like in Florida, if you're in the trades, you have to be a corporation. That's just a requirement because of liability reasons and so forth. That's just what the state wants. It's different in every state, and that's the other thing you have to take into consider. What is it in your state? But a lot of people, I always say, well, you start out, if you're just doing a concept, start out as an LLC, that's fine. And a lot of people don't know what the difference between an LLC and a sole proprietorship is either, Oh, the LLC is the same thing. It just gives you liability protection. And then, because there is a cost to doing corporate work, there is a cost to a partnership above and beyond what a simple Schedule C is, because you've got separate, you got to make payments to the state, An S corporation in California costs $800 a year. Just boom. Ridiculous. And if Florida's 150, so it depends where you go. And so there's overhead costs. There's the additional cost of doing tax returns. There's additional cost of payroll. There's additional, because you have to payroll yourself. And so do your concept maybe at a lower one, but know what the cost is to go to a different legal format so that when the time comes where you're making enough profit to cover that extra cost and it will save you so and such and such so much money, then that's the time to go. So these are other things you need to learn. It's just, you just can't just flat out say, oh, I want to be this. It doesn't work that way. You're going to end up losing money that way, It's business is a journey. It's not a sprint.
Oh, you've mentioned Florida and California, which are the states that we live in. And I know that a lot of times people set up businesses in Delaware because of the different tax implications there. So, for instance, if I am primarily based in California, but my business is virtual, do I need to set up as a California entity, or could I set up in a different state that might be a little bit more favorable?
You can set up your corporation in any state in the union, but here's what the states have done. The states aren't stupid. They want their share of the money. So like in Florida, if you go and you set up a corporation in Delaware, then Florida considers that a foreign corporation. And you operate in Florida, they consider it a foreign corporation. Therefore, you have to pay the registrations for a foreign corporation, which are more than a domestic corporation. So that gets you coming and going. I mean, so that is there some particular if you're going to go out of state somewhere else, you better know the particulars of how your state treats that and run the numbers to see if it actually. Now, usually the people that do, a lot of people do Texas, a lot of people do Delaware, and there are some advantages tax-wise to that. But the cost of doing that may be as much or more than the savings of doing that. So you have to be really, really careful. This is where you really need somebody experienced on your side to be able to do this analysis for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so that is when you would look at hiring somebody or having somebody as an advisor or a consultant.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I do a lot of consulting that way too. Some people don't want to learn. They just want to have somebody to consult with somebody. And there's nothing wrong with that. If you don't want to learn it yourself, if you don't want to consult, find yourself a good mentor, if nothing else. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the things I talk about in some of my training is how to find a good mentor for your business, because that is worth gold. If you can actually find somebody that is successful, that has been through the ranks and knows what they're talking about and is willing to advise you, that's gold. That is gold. That's one of the best things you could do.
Fantastic. So speaking of that, you have some online courses now, and you have what you call the 3 pillars to build a small business foundation. So will you talk to us about the inception of your online tools and how people can go to your website and what they'll find there?
Well, I kind of, about 2 years ago, I sat down and I just wrote all this. I mean, I took 20 years worth of experience in working with small business people. And I said, where are the pain points? What are the things that people need to do? And I sat down and I actually wrote a course and I videotaped it. There's 7 hours worth of video instruction in the course alone. And it goes through each of the different types of legal formats in this country. And what are all the pros? What are the cons each? When's the best time to go to one to another? It goes through what is probably one of the second most biggest pain points, as far as I found when I was working people, is what kind of paperwork do you need to keep? I would come people in, they'd have a delivery business and they wouldn't have a mileage log. They had no idea, and it's amazing. They don't know what depreciation is or how you can use it to your advantage. There's all these things. And the third section goes into the tax implications of the different legal formats that you have. Plus, there's all kinds of bonuses there. There are fun things too to learn. So there's lots and lots. I call it basically, it's the college level course that you should be taking in college.
Yeah.
Learn all of this stuff. And of course, it also comes with individualized consulting with it also, because I don't leave people out on a limb. Yeah, I want them to be able to, I want to help people, you know? I want to educate them and help them be as successful as they possibly can be.
Fantastic. What are some of the biggest ahas that you've had in your journey since starting to help people in the past 20 years, consult with their businesses, and then deciding to create the course?
Oh, there's there's a lot of things. We had one gentleman that his friend asked him if he'd like to be a salesman for energy contracts. And I didn't know there was such a thing, you know. The thing that I have to do when I take on a business client, I have to learn their business. If I'm going to do a job, I'm going to learn their business. That's why I tell people, if you sit down with a CPA or a tax professional and they don't want to sit down and have a conversation with you, a long conversation with you, and ask you all kinds of questions about your business, get up and walk away because they don't carry your number to them. But so I had to learn the energy contract business. But he came in, he'd never run a business before. He didn't form a business. He just went and sold. He made $250,000 in commissions the first year. His bookkeeping system was his personal checkbook. He didn't keep any mileage log, even though he serviced a three-state area. Yeah. And so I said, well, reconstruct as much as you can, but you're going to be audited. You don't run $250,000 through a Schedule C. You just don't do it unless you have really good books. But not only that, you're paying a lot more taxes than you need to be, you know. And so I gave him a list of everything that he needed to do, the restructuring. And so he came back to me the second year, made another $250,000. But he'd done one thing. He had gone and created a business checking account with a business debit card, but nothing else. Oh. I said, you're going to be audited again.
Oh, no.
And about 6 months later, the first audit letter came. And he was audited for both years. He learned his lesson. He listened to me that time. The third year he came back, he had the legal formats and structured and things, but I hate to see that, you know, I hate to see that. If somebody would just have, he didn't want to listen. He didn't want to learn, you know. On the other hand, a couple of years ago, I had for the other extreme, I had a home chef come see me. And her first year, she must be a good home chef because her first year, she made $100,000 profit. She had a good bookkeeping system. That's fine. She came to be early enough in the tax season that I could use some of the tax laws, the exceptions to the laws, to restructure her out of a Schedule C into an S Corp and get her set up properly. And she listened to everything I did and did it down the line. And when we finally sat down and did her taxes, and I compared apples to apples, she saved about $8,000 in taxes by listening to me and was willing to learn, you know. And so one extreme to the other extreme, you know, and that's what I get. And then there's all these people in between, you know. Right. I've had other people. I've had a guy who owned a painting company, and I started out where he was doing the painting, and 10 years later, when he went out and got an accountant because he got so big, and that's fine, that we teach him. And when he left me, he had 12 crews, you know. But I helped him every step make the adjustments that he needed to do in the accounting and the tax world to get what he wanted. He wanted to buy a house. And, you know, qualifying for a mortgage when you're work for yourself is hard to do. They want 3 years worth of tax returns. So he says, so I need my tax returns to be in this range for 3 years. And I said, well, this is what you've got to do. This is how we need to restructure your depreciation and everything so that it evens the income expenses out over those 3-year period. And we did that. I worked with him to do that, and he was able to buy his house. But these are the things that a good tax preparer can do for you, can help you with. But they have to be able to learn your business. They have to know your goals, both business-wise and personal-wise. And if they're not willing to sit down and learn that, walk the other way. Go find somebody that will.
Wow. Well,
so these are the lessons that people can learn.
Definitely. Those are great cases. And I wanted to ask, what are some of the things that people aren't doing that they should institute in their businesses to save money on taxes?
I think the biggest thing that a lot of people, especially people starting out, is you got to have a good bookkeeping system.
Mhm.
Okay. And you have to actually use it.
Yeah.
And that may sound crazy,
No.
but I mean, people go out and they buy QuickBooks, but then they don't enter their information. They don't,
Wrong.
oh, and I say, people, well, my checking account statement or my credit card statement shows everything that I bought for the business. I said, really? Well, the IRS doesn't care about that. They want to see the receipts. So, because you could go to Walmart and you could buy personal or you could buy business office supplies. How do they know it's not personal or how do they know it's not business unless they see the receipt and know what you bought?
Yeah.
The statements doesn't show that. So that's a big mistake a lot of people make is you have to keep the receipts also. Now, do you have to keep them in paper? No, I don't keep paper in my office. I have a scanner beside my computer. The receipts come in, they get scanned, they put in the cloud, and I hope I'll never need them. But if I ever do need to show something to the IRS, I hit the print button and I've got it right there. So your processes, your organizational processes are very, very important.
Yeah. I'm just cringing at my processes and the things that I need to do. For somebody who is not naturally inclined to sit down and make sure that they're even knowing how important it is to have your bookkeeping straight. And if you're using a tool like QuickBooks, that you have everything set up and that you're making sure you're going through it and matching things, right?
Right.
The right categories. What's an easy way for people to get started? Is it to block a half hour a week or, at the beginning of each week or at the end of each week or a certain amount of time, or just make sure that you're putting it into your schedule to be keeping up with this?
Anytime I make any purchases for the business, I may not enter them that day, but I never go more than 24 hours without entering them because life happens.
Yeah.
When life happens, you forget to do things. And then the statement comes at the end of the year, end of the month, and you go to look at it and to balance it and something, you find, oops, there's an expenditure I made and I don't have enough money in the bank. So, that's what I suggest anyway. 48 hours at the max, you should have that entered in there and taken care of, because like I said before, you should be able to at any time or place tell exactly what your net profit year to date is, and it's easy to do in an accounting system. You just run a report, a P&L report. But if you're not entering the information into that, you're not going to get an accurate report.
Yeah, that's very true. I'm going to have to download your course myself and take a look at it. So, Roger, I wanted to find out, what does life look like for you now, day to day?
Oh, well, I still work every tax season and sometimes off tax seasons. I have about 500 clients I work with just on taxes. And that's and then in the off season, I do a lot of consulting work. I'm here in Florida, and I just finished helping a gentleman set up a new business. And it's not just going to the state. I mean, we had to deal with occupational licenses for different states. And then we did a DBA and we have to post that in the paper. And then you have to do your BOI reporting. And you have done your BOI reporting, right? That's the beneficial ownership information.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. And a lot of people don't know that about that. So all my business people, I'm asking if they got that done yet or not. So I do a little bit of everything, whatever I can do to help somebody out.
Fantastic.
And sometimes it's just answering a question. Sometimes I'll just have somebody go to the website and they shoot me a contact message and ask me a question. And I'm glad to answer that too.
I love the fact that you're still so inspired to keep doing what you do.
What's the greatest feeling in the world when you can help somebody, and especially if you show them how to save money and how to be more successful, and they come back and they show me, and wow, you had a great year. You had a great year. You took all that advice and you used it. And what better feeling in the world is that,
Yeah, amazing. And your website, of course, is Seagull and Technologies.
Right.
And you do have a free report. What's included in that report?
It goes through the basics of the three pillars that every business is built on, basically. It's a short report that, outlines the three pillars, what I'm talking about, and why they're important.
Oh, wonderful. We will link that in the show notes.
Okay.
so that everybody can find it and get to your website and see everything else that you do. You also have your course, correct? And
Correct. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
I've got links to everything I do right from the front page of seagulltechnologies.com. Seagull is spelled like the bird, by the way.
yeah.
And for those, I have people ask me, well, where did the word seagull come from? And so I said, well, if you go to the about section of the website, I wrote the seagull's autobiography.
Oh,
And
okay.
it showed the seagull's journey from 1974 onward. It's just kind of a tongue-in-cheek thing. It's kind of cute.
Yeah. Oh, that's fun. I'm definitely going to check that out. Is there any last word of wisdom that you want to impart on somebody who is either starting a business or maybe has started their business but didn't set up their structure properly?
Learn how to do it. Learn how to do it and then find somebody to help you that cares about doing it properly. And you're just not another number. I have so many clients that come to me that I inherit from other CPAs and other things. And not everybody's created equal. I correct a lot of mistakes. And I see a lot of mistakes and I go, oh, God, what a shame, you know. I wish I could have talked to you a couple years earlier, you know. I could have saved you a bunch of money. But that happens. It happens. That's life. So, you know, and read, study, get a good book. I mean, if you want a good book, read Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. It is the definitive business book. It really, really is. It puts your mind in the right state to understand business.
Wow.
And I read it at least once a year. I do.
Nice. And you can help people from anywhere in the United States?
Anywhere in the United States, yes.
Fantastic. My last question is also one of my favorites. I want to know if you have a favorite quote, mantra, verse, poem, family motto, the words that keep inspiring you to do what you do every day.
Wow. That's not something it's kind of a shifting thing, I think. It's just, you know, my main thing is just who have you helped today? You know? And anytime I can point out that, answer that question is a good day.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much for giving some of your time to us today.
Oh, I really enjoyed the conversation. I really did.
Yeah, so did I. And I think a lot of people have a lot to learn from you. And hopefully we'll be going to your website. I have it pulled up already, but I'm just going to give myself a little refresher on a lot of the concepts. And
Okay.
I'm sure I'll be one of the people calling you
Cool.
as well. So thank you again, Roger. And thank you to everybody who's watching or listening to this episode, getting a little bit more knowledge to help make your day and your life and your business brighter and a little bit less complex. Thanks for listening or watching to this episode of Your Brand Amplified. Don't forget to leave us a rating or review on your favorite podcast listening platform. And if you want to learn more, check us out at yourbrandamplified.com.